All right. Well, hello everybody. My name is Joey. I made the foolish decision of volunteering to lead the book club tonight. Um, Now, I only read half of this chapter, so I guess for the latter half, I'm going to be flying by the seat of my pants. Also, I'm sort of bad at extracting detail from what I read, so if anybody wants to interrupt me and correct what I say or add to anything, feel free. So this chapter is about statements in state, as you can plainly read there. Now, I'm sort of ashamed to say this, but I never, up until now, I never really established the relationship between the word statement and state, because I never thought of statement as something that changes the state of a program, even though it's the root word. So the author defines a statement as something that modifies the state of the program. And basically what I gathered is that statements don't produce values themselves, but they are composed of expressions. So let's see here. So he defines the new rules for statements. And I guess we have to make a new class for statements since they're distinctly separate from expressions. So let's see here. I never wrote this AST class generator. I thought it was a little overkill and I'm sort of lazy, but I like the concept behind it. I think it's pretty cool that you can give it these strings and it produces a class out of that. So maybe I will write it eventually, but let's see. I think the word statement comes from state verb rather than state noun though. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. I think the code interpreter proves much more useful later as the interpreter grows. Yeah, you know, I started out thinking, man, we only have like 5 classes, but I can see how it can be useful once we extend that. You know, but
I found that the
I mean,
statement.
the way I wrote.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that the way I wrote my interpreter in a Kotlin, I actually still don't really find it that useful because, I mean, I still wrote it because I was following along with the book, but Kotlin provides a lot of syntax for doing that kind of stuff. So like my whole code generation script in Kotlin is like 5 lines or something like that. Well, of course, the Java version is like 20 lines. So for me, if I wasn't following along with the book, it would just be a lot simpler to like just write the code for each different kind of statement or expression thing.
So does Kotlin have like pattern matching and language level sum types?
Yeah.
Okay. Because the book talks a lot how like all that it's doing with the visitor pattern is basically a substitute for that because Java doesn't have those features.
right. Yeah.
I still use the visitor pattern in my code, but I do use the pattern matching syntax for a lot of other things. I mean, I also use it a lot as just a fancy switch.
So, Max, since Kotlin's a functional language, did you find it easier? I know in an earlier chapter, the author touched on the expression problem. Do you find it easier to add new classes or add new functionality?
Well, I'm using the visitor pattern still.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I'm doing it the same way.
Oh, okay.
I could have gone with like a pattern matching thing, but I didn't. I guess technically I still could, because each of the expressions are different types. So I could still I could still refactor my parser to use that, but I haven't.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got mine with some types. Well, as much as some types as you can get with Pascal, but it's been pretty nice having it that way so far.
So did you say Pascal?
Yes, I did.
Wait,
Good
with a P or
job.
with an H?
Sorry, what was that?
With a P or with an H?
With a P.
Oh wow.
Good job. I miss Pascal. I miss this was the numerals where you could have like from 5 to 10 or 5 to 7 or the subset like it was such a nice feature.
Oh man, what language are you in now? That's like, don't we all got those nowadays?
I where you can have an integer that's from not a list of numbers, but actual integer whose range is say any arbitrary number within the range
Oh,
of
you're
that.
saying from a type. Oh, I thought you were just saying like A2I.
No, that you can actually have a value that's only valid from say 1 to 7.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's built into the language, so it's just like, var x colon 1.7 or something like that, or dot 7 or something like that.
You can probably like optimize it, like make that a uint whatever, uint 2.
It probably uses storage of like one of the integer types, yeah, but not having to worry about your number going out of range and that be, and then it also had it was really neat to I haven't seen that elsewhere, but I haven't really looked either.
Cool.
So my last job, I've never programmed in Pascal before, but I did program in a language called structured text, which is a language used to program PLCs. And from what I read, structured text is sort of similar to Pascal. But the curious thing about structured text IDEs is that they separate variable declarations from the rest of the program. So like the IDE literally has 2 text fields, one for the program and one for variable declarations. Is it the same way in Pascal, or is that just a structured text thing?
Yeah, you have to declare, like you've got a separate part at the beginning of each procedure or each function where you declare all your variables and then you do your begin end and write your actual function logic.
Oh, wow. That's curious. Okay.
Yeah. I think it just makes it easier for the compiler so they know right at the beginning how much.
Yeah, sort of like
allocate.
old school C, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of went off kilter on the book and just started writing my own language. And one of the things I'm finding is the structures the statements they're providing structure for a lot of structure for how the parsing will be. It's a dialect of basic. So like, you know exactly what, and everything's line based. So, but it really made it easier to not have to have everything as an expression.
Uh-huh.
But
All right. So yeah, so the author points out this is just a little minutia. This is sort of weird how you have to specify null if the function is supposed to return a boxed void type. I only learned a little bit of Java in college. I'm not really an expert, and I never really used the boxed primitives. I just thought that was sort of curious and wasn't sure what to make of that.
Boxed primitives are pretty common, but boxed void, in my experience, is pretty rarely used.
Yeah. It sounds, I guess, well, he says right here, he uses void because you can pass boxed void as a type parameter, I guess. So let's see here. like how he keeps saying that we have he keeps reminding us that we have to import particular classes. I just sort of thought he would leave that out and just let our IDEs do the work, but I guess he's assuming that we're not using an IDE. Okay, so far we have print statements. Now, we add a couple more statement types, or yeah, or no, just one more statement type, and then a variable expression. Now, down here somewhere, here. At first, I thought this was a little weird. Intuitively, it's pretty common to, declare a variable and not initialize it. But I thought it was sort of weird that, since a statement is supposed to modify the state of a program, that initialization is optional. But then I realized that, if you think about the state of your program as like a box full of things, then just adding a name is enough to say that you changed the state. So that's another thing I thought was sort of curious. And then here's the variable expression where identifiers.
Also, it's not like uninitialized in the like C sense. It's just nil. Right?
Okay, yeah. Yeah. More AST generator stuff. So I've only implemented my interpreter up to chapter 6, but looks like we implement a synchronization method to for statements as well. Yeah, this is about where where I stopped reading. So does anybody have anything to add before I move on?
I guess this is another little bit of a side tangent here, but
Mhm.
there's like more of the parsing and stuff in the try catch block. I'm just wondering like how other people are doing it. Like, are you guys using the try catch with the parse error and stuff, or doing
No,
a option
I'm not
type
doing
or something?
that. I'm just returning the error. Well, actually, no, in declaration, yeah, I return an error. I have like a result like thing so that the program will read. So if there's like a declaration or something, it'll return the error, and then it does a synchronized like thing. My code isn't like super functional. My synchronized stuff is very stateful.
Yeah, I'm doing mine just exactly like his for now. I decided want to learn it that way first before I branch out.
Yeah, I actually think that's a good idea. I ran into some problems where in my interpreter where I tried doing things differently. And for some parts in the book, then he'll introduce something new that really depends on implementing a previous thing in a certain way. And then that really stinks. Like one of them is, so for some reason, something that I really didn't like is that in the parser, we sort of get rid of all of the tokens once we get to the parser, meaning that the parser, like the thing that the parser returns isn't a sequence of tokens. The parser is just it'll be like a sequence of values. And that made it a lot difficult for me to have good error messages. So I tried having the parser keep track of the different tokens as well. So that way it would be a sequence of, so each parse expression would be one or more tokens. But then later on, that made it really difficult to implement the interpreter in the last chapter. So yeah, I probably should have stuck closer to the book, I think.
Yeah, it's hard doing it in another language and also like making different design choices, because then you've got to translate Java to whatever language you're working in, and then his design choices to your design choices. And it's just so much more mental overhead than pasting code.
Yeah, I think the book though is kind of designed for that. I feel like the author purposefully leaves out a lot of stuff in the book to make people want to, like, not leave out how to do things, but like leave out obvious features to inspire readers to add more stuff. And also he has those sections at the bottom that are like, that don't tell you how to do things, but just, challenge you to add new features. So I like that aspect of the book.
Yeah, it's pretty open-ended. Like I said, I haven't read this far, but I'm sort of curious to see how he implements scope. Oh wait, we're not doing scope in this chapter, are we? We're just doing global variables, right?
Do you want me to take over, or
We do
you're
scope.
fine?
We get there later on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can take
in
over
this
if you want.
chapter.
Yeah, okay,
Do-
so
Would you want me to stop sharing my screen, or do you want me to?
yeah,
Okay.
so now we are done with AST stuff, and
Did we lose him?
my Zoom just crashed.
Ah,
That's really annoying. I really need to find a solution for that, but yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So yeah, now we're done with ASD stuff and parsing, and yeah, we can start dealing with the runtime where we have variables, we need to store them somewhere, and we need some kind of data structure And this data structure is usually called an environment or context, but context is more often used for like typing context. So environment is more often used for runtime stuff. So we use this hash map. And in Java, we have like a generic map, which is the hash map. And yeah, it's the key string, and the value is object, which is just logs values. And here's a comment. Java call them maps and hash maps. Other language call them hash tables, dictionaries, hashes, tables, associative arrays. Way back when it's called scatter tables. By the way, there is also a language called them unordered maps. This is a very common data structure. And there is a Java map in there to store the bindings. It use string for keys, not tokens, because yeah, for tokens store some additional information that are not needed for the key, and also just token that not unique. We can have multiple tokens at different locations refer to the same identifier. When we define a variable, we simply put them into the environment, which is the value. And also now we need to make a semantic choice where in here, this is shadowing where we redefine existing variable, which in some programming language is an error, but in here in logs, we just say, oh, it's okay. Let's just,
Hey, I like that song.
I don't know, probably don't want to understand what the lyric is, otherwise it will be ugly.
Yeah, you don't want
Definitely need to do some editing for these videos. And then it further comments that if we make this an error, it kind of interacts poorly with the repo. So another choice is that this is an error, but in repo, we are free to do what we want. So we have two sets of semantics, but that way we kind of have two sets of rules, and users need to memorize two sets of rules, and no, they're different. So that's why they choose this behavior, even though this behavior, to be honest, is a bit weird, because usually when we do shadowing, it's like a separate scope, but in here we just change the existing variable.
So an example that does, what the chapter is talking about, and what you were saying is that I know that a lot of JavaScript REPLs will do this. So like in the browser's dev tools, you can like redefine const variables, and you can say, const something equals whatever, and you can say that twice. But then of course in the browser it doesn't do that. And I think Dino does the same thing, that you can override those variables in the REPL, but not when your program is actually running.
Yeah, and also I think for certain languages, you definitely can't redefine a function. But in a REPL, you probably want users to be able to do that. So
Yeah.
I think it's fine for REPL to have different rules, but that's not a choice logs take.
Yeah.
And once a variable exists, we need to some way to look it up. And we want custom error handling, so we don't use Java's exception. Instead, we manually check, and if it doesn't exist in the environment we throw, and again, we are making a choice here to say the variable not find is a runtime error. So we have several choices. One is make it compile time error, but since we don't have a like type checking or name resolution pass, we are dynamically typed, we can only make it a syntax error, which is extremely hard, almost so it's impossible to work this way. So we make it a runtime error, which is the next best thing. Allowing it and return some default value like nil. That sounds like just a disaster recipe for me.
Yeah.
Remember Nan?
JavaScript, and it's awful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's JavaScript. I think error we often meet when coding JavaScript is like undefined, like method of undefined is.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like you only know it is undefined when you are calling something, calling a method, and it doesn't exist. And then it mentions that recursion is one of the problem that making it a syntax error just you can't deal with recursion because like here is even is referred to before it is defined. And various languages use various strategies. For example, language like C has forward declarations, and some other languages like Java or C# or like Rust, they just say all the top level functions are special. They don't have an order. Instead, they are all they come together. which I think this way is kind of getting tractions now. And because we are simple dynamic type language, we certainly can't do this. And so we just think, well, make it a runtime error is fine. So we'll make it a runtime error. So then for the interpreter, we just add an environment as a top level because that's a global environment. And so it will be there as long as the interpreter is there. And also we need to implement this statement visitor. So we need to visit the variable declaration and also visit the print statement. And for the variable declaration, if the statement has an initializer, we need to actually evaluate the initializer to get the value. Otherwise, the value is just null, which corresponding to logs nil. And then we just add them to the environment. And also we have variable expression, which is the expression to retrieve variables, and that's simple. We just get it from the environment. And if the variable doesn't exist, we will throw a Java exception as the code before shows. So now this code will work. And then the code talks about assignment, where we can actually mutate the variables. Actually, I think it's a little bit weird, like in logs, there's the previous shadowing. So in logs, the shadowing syntax actually have the assignment semantics, which is really weird, but that's his choice. But now we just we will add assignment, and it talks a little bit about some languages that's not like that, and some interesting rant.
Yeah, I like that. I like that side note there.
Yeah, and mentions he'll just do that anyway because most languages do. And then he mentions there are languages like most C derived languages, assignment is an expression instead of a statement. The only reason for that, even though that's confusing, is that people can do some weird stuff like A equal to B equal to C, A equal to 42, and then you assign all three variables together. But in some other languages, assignment is a statement, and in here, in logs, and no, I think this is not the. Okay, so yeah, he decides here assignment is an expression, so he follows the choice of the C, where assignment is an expression, and so we can also do those kind of weird stuff of assigning multiple variables together. The grammar here only says assignment, the left-hand side is identifier, which works for now. But later we need to modify that to support things like that. Or even just the weird stuff I talked before. Oh, I guess not, because the weird stuff I talked before, left-hand side is still the identifier. Add a new syntax tree node, and for the expression, we can just directly go to an assignment when doing parsing. No, then it's get a little bit trickier because a single token look ahead recursive descent parser can't see far enough. To tell this is assignment until we goes into this equal sign. And then he further mentions, why does it matter? Because we already did that for binary expressions, but why assignment is special? That's because the left-hand side of assignment is special. So, for example, usually when we have an expression identifier, variable expression, which I should say, we can retrieve its value. But if the left-hand side is inside assignment, we can't do that. Instead, we need to just update what it is stored. And then he mentioned those kind of refers to the L value and R value situation. If we are designing an imperative language, then it's highly likely we will also have this situation where some some expressions can be assigned into, and those expressions are called L value because it's well, what those expressions evaluate to is called L value, and it is because it's at the left-hand side of assignment. And also then there are those temporaries that you just cannot assign into, and those are R values. And then we need to say that L value isn't evaluated like a normal expression because we need to decide what to do with them until we see whether it's assignment or not. And that's why this expression assign node has a token for the left-hand side rather than expression. And the parser doesn't know it's parsing an L value. It's just thinking it's parsing an expression until a lot of tokens later. For example, if we have cases like this. And it mentions it can be unbounded number of tokens of local head, which our parser just simply does not support. Our parser just have a single token look ahead. We store the previous token and the current token basically in our parser. So we do a little trick here. We see if we don't meet the equal sign, everything is good. We just get an expression. If we meet the equal sign, then the previous token is then the previous expression should be a variable here. And the value is we just using the parse assignment. Which go back into here. But if we don't have further assignment, we will just fall down. This is for like parsing cases where we have like A equal to B equal to C, this kind of situation. And yeah, and then it just all works. Can anyone explain this side note for me? Because I don't understand this when I read this chapter.
From what I understood, it's just a trick to get better syntax errors so that so like the I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, but just to have your grammar accept certain kinds of syntax that won't actually run correctly, so that way you can have a special case when either your interpreter or your parser encounters those tokens to then give a better error message.
Okay.
So in that sense, like, because for this case here, if your how do I say this? Like, if you write your interpreter so that only the exact code that's like supposed to run correctly will be parsed or whatever, then you'll probably get really bad error messages if someone does it wrong, right? Because in a case like this, your parser will crash or whatever. But in this case, you can make the grammar a bit more broad. And then when you're actually running the code, actually, I forgot what it's talking about in this section, if this is talking about if we're still parsing it or not. But at a later time, you can then look at those tokens and then say, oh, you meant to say this, or you're trying to do this, but you should have done it this way.
Oh, I see. So this is like, what is called error production?
I don't know what that means, but I remember I actually brought this up a few weeks ago, that that's a feature that I like. For example, you can do that in Rust macros or in Swift UI result builders. You can do similar kinds of tricks where you make the syntax a bit broader than what's actually allowed. So that way, as you run the code, you can give better error messages.
Yeah, I think it's called error production. I mean, this website looks interesting, even though it's looks sketchy, but I feel like, yeah, this looks interesting. I will bookmark that.
What is up with your bra? You have a
What?
bookmark there. You have a bookmark. What's up with my bra? Are you having some trouble with that?
You mean what?
Your second class bookmark that you have on your bookmark bar? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as interesting as you imagine. What's up with my branch on GPU?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Never mind.
Okay, I really like this side note though. It mentions why we keep parentheses in the syntax tree, which I wondered before, actually. I wondered a few times why like ASD needs to keep the syntax tree.
Actually, yeah,
And
on that one, earlier on when I did the parser, I did do the grouping, and now like that second one, that's an error that works in my interpreter.
yeah. Yeah, just like there's L value and R value distinction. We can assign to an L value, and this R value we just count.
Now, are there any languages out there where that would be a valid assignment if you parenthesized it?
C++ probably.
No.
I'm sure I could figure out an expression in C++ that made that valid.
Yeah, just have the plus operator overloaded to return something that has a valid assignment operator.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't think of any examples.
I don't think I've ever tried to do that in any language.
It's not something you will intentionally do. But this is just an example.
JavaScript, if it's not strict, because I've actually seen similar tricks like that before, where like if you want to assign multiple things, you can use like a comma. Yeah, can you try that? Just in like parens AE equals 3, I guess.
Actually, I just tried it in my interpreter. It works perfectly fine in Pascal.
Oh yeah, that's so weird.
And it worked in C++ on Godbolt. I was pretty sure you could, just with integers even.
Really?
Yeah, I pasted the link. Not that it takes much.
Huh.
That's so weird.
One thing I don't like about C++ is that that assignment is an expression and it just causes so many problems. It's
Yeah, no,
I
but
like
that's not C++. That's like a long tradition from C. Even logs follows that.
mhm. I think I would rather, like, I know in my language, it's a statement. It has to be on its own, its own thing, and can't be mixed, because it just, and then that also frees me up to have the equal symbol for equality.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Hmm. Instead of
Yeah,
equal, I can just say
it's
equal.
basically the reason for expression is that they want to allow these kind of things.
I feel like you're just.
I don't like that either.
Ambiguity is another though. Because now it's not ambiguous whether or not assignment's an expression, but now it's a confusion whether you're reassigning or checking for equality. I mean, you could just look at the front of the line and then I guess see if you're doing an assignment, but I don't know.
Well, it'd be on its own line, and because it's line based for each instead of a semicolon, it's a new line, unless you do a
Yeah.
continuation.
But like, let's say I wanted to set a Boolean value if two numbers are equal, right?
Yeah.
Then is that like,
You're already having identifier equals as the first thing in the line.
yeah,
So
like, so then you have identifier, so you have like A equals B.
yeah, and now you're into expression parsing, and equality inside of an expression is it's checking for equality, not assignment.
No, I see. I was just saying that you fix one ambiguity by having assignment be a statement. But then I feel like you replace that ambiguity with another it's not like actually ambiguous in terms of the grammar. As you said, it's well defined.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like, use arrows or use colon or something else for assignment.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's a cool thing. You're making your own language. You do you. I think that's neat. Because I don't know of any language that uses the same symbol for assignment and equality. So it's cool that you're making a language that does that.
Well, when you write it on paper, you do, though, right? Unless you're using like a different notation where you use arrows or something. But like when I'm writing assignment when I was doing math, I'd be writing it with an equal sign. But if I'm doing like an equality table, I'd probably write it as just an equals.
That's true. That's a good point. I stand corrected. I guess it's not.
But yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong way, but I definitely don't want the assignment expression inside something, because it happens so often that you don't type that second or third, depending on equal symbol, and it ends up, because it's valid.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then for the assignments, the semantics of assignment, we just call this assign rather than define. It is very similar to verbal declaration, except the right hand. Except we need to check whether the variable exists or not. And then the books start to talk about scope, and lexical scope, or less commonly called static scoping, which which is basically we know the scope of a variable when we look at the text. In logs, as in most modern languages, variables are lexically scoped. When you see expression that use some variable, you can figure out which variable it refers to by just reading the code. And most languages have static scoping nowadays. This is an interesting side note mentions earlier languages were often dynamically scoped. Computer scientists back then believed dynamic scope was faster to execute. So that's an interesting, very interesting take. And today, thanks to early scheme hackers, we know it's not true because scheme did a lot of work in this area. And yeah, it at least my intuition is opposite. Dynamic scoping needs more bookkeeping information.
We kind of have that in C++, don't we, with RVO and RVO? Well, RVO for sure, where the scope of the variable you just declared is not actually in your current scope.
That's well, you already mentioned RVO is RVO in the name is optimization, so it had no impact.
It's semantic though, because I can depend on it because non-copyable, non-movable types can use it as of C++ 17.
Yeah, well, but then
it's not an optimization anymore. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, I guess, but that's called mandatory copulation. It's kind of different, but still, it doesn't change any scope. We look at a variable, we know what it refers to. It is I don't know what to say about it, but this is not related to scope. If this is related to, I just feel like if this is dynamic scoping, there are a lot of things are dynamic scoping because this is a runtime thing. Basically, this the objects come from somewhere, not where I expect it comes from, but that happens all the time at runtime. And object is different from variables.
Yeah, I think that's the difference, right? Is that like in this case, we're talking about like it's not like with RBO, it's not like you can use the variable name like outside that function, you know? So it's more about the value than the variable, you know?
Yeah. And some language have optional dynamic scoping. The Emacs has dynamic scope by default, even though there is just a syntax to disable it in a file, and people usually do.
Apparently Bash and LaTeX do too.
LaTeX?
LaTeX and Bash apparently.
Okay. Interesting. Never even think about that.
Bash. Well, that makes sense for Bash, right? Like if you set it on the environment, right? Because you have to specifically say like local in Bash, right? If you want it to be scoped to, I remember what it is. It's not a function. There's some word for those sorts of things.
That's not export.
No. I'm saying that the word, like the local makes it like function scoped, but there's another word for it in Bash. Because it's not just functions that it applies to. But I forget. Nah, it doesn't matter. No. I try to know as little bash as possible. I tend to live a life happier that way. I know too much bash, I think.
I just feel like, well, the problem with Bash, one is it's a very legacy language, but two, it doesn't work on Windows. And I heard enough stories of people interning in a company and their job is to rewrite some Bash script into Python so it can be run on Windows.
Well, I also just feel like if you have a bash script that's more than like 20 lines, then it's too long. That's when I would normally rewrite it in like Python or Go. Normally Python. Python's like my default bash but better language.
It's just like if you want some like CI, something using CI/CD kind of stuff, then definitely don't do Bash, because even now you don't need Windows, and you are confident you never need Windows. Still, Python is a better language to maintain.
Yeah, I agree. That I try to only write very short bash programs because I made the mistake in my life of trying to write long bash programs. And that's a disaster.
Okay, and the binding macros of Clojure, which I'm not familiar with Clojure, so I don't know anything about it.
Oh, I forgot about with in JavaScript.
Well, it's deprecated and no one uses it
What
anyway.
does that
So
mean, deprecated? Isn't this thing deprecated on the web? Don't you know? I mean, you can't use it in like strict mode, but nothing's ever truly deprecated on the web.
Is that like with and like some of the basics, like VB?
I don't know, but essentially with in JavaScript is like you have with and then let's say some object or a class, and then you have a block, and inside that block you can reference the object or the class members without having to use like this dot or something.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, wait, what is two-string? Oh, yeah. Oh,
I-
right.
I-
That's two-string on the thing. Yeah, it's
I
yes,
remember that years
also
ago.
if it's designed properly, I think Kotlin have similar features, but it's much well designed than this mess.
Oh, really? I haven't seen that in Kotlin.
It don't use like dynamic scoping.
Cool. Yeah, in JavaScript, it's a disaster, but it's really cool. It's really cool. I mean, there's been times that I've wanted it, but you know, alas.
Yeah, JavaScript this is just so weird in general. You know? And yeah, it mentions if we need to support this kind of block scope, when we into here we have variable A, when we out this variable A get dropped, and when we into here we have another variable A.
I really miss it when I'm in a language that doesn't have scoping like that.
Scoping like that, you mean?
Yeah, like scoping.
Doesn't have
Is-
scoping? Oh, what do you mean? Do you mean like
Where
dynamic
these two
scoping?
A's are distinct objects, and that so and you can like just being able just having the where was it? Yeah, it was some of the older languages you couldn't just introduce scope anywhere. You had to create a new function or in order to introduce scoping, and so you couldn't do where you just have impromptu scope like you do here.
I think Python is still like that.
I think so, and
Yeah.
it makes it hard to reason sometimes because you don't like things are still around that you just and you want to use those names.
Yeah, Python is still like that, and JS with var used to like that. So it's still
I think
around, not
JavaScript
older
you can
languages.
you can use the braces to introduce scope in JavaScript, can't you?
Yes, but some things are function scoped and other things are block scoped. So there's
So
different,
yeah,
and then there's
with let and const it's block scoped, with var is function scoped.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
That's why they introduced let and const, because semantics of var in JavaScript is confusing.
Yeah, and also just because of there's like things within like promises, like things will accidentally get shadowed, and there's other reasons why let was introduced too.
Yeah. And it mentions method and field and object are dynamically scoped. Because when we call method, we don't know which one it is called. We actually need to look up the actual object. And it's mentioned a little bit that logs have C-like syntax, and scope is controlled by the curly braces. So that's why we call it block scope. And it mentions that we can implement it in a way that, well, if we go to each statement, we keep track of any variable declared, and when we exit, we tell the environment to delete all those variables. But that doesn't work well with stuff like shadowing. In here we have a volume, and when we go outside, we will go back into the previous volume rather than say just delete volume. And whether it's shadowed or not, we need to deal with them. Like in this case, we have two variables, one inside, one outside. We need to deal with them fine. So the solution is a stack. Is for each block, enter each block, we had a new layer into the stack. And in our environment, we basically just have a reference to the enclosed environment. That's how it works. For the global environment, we just the enclosing environment is null. For other environment, it always have a parent. And then we say we just look up when we look up the environment, we say we first we try to get it from the current environment. If it doesn't exist, we try to get from the enclosing environment, and we just look up this chain until it doesn't have enclosing environment anymore. Then when we try to look up, it's an error. And yeah, assignment works in a similar way. Just we have a distinct assign function, so we need to duplicate this logic. I wonder if languages with option type would do this differently in the compiler. So the question is, if a language has option type, can it do differently here? Yeah, definitely.
What do you mean?
Well, if in Java everything can be null.
Yeah.
In language, let's say some kind of ML dialect, you probably need option here.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Similar with Rust, you need option here. Though in Rust you need some kind of option, and then inside you need a box.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar in C++, you need a like. Well, C++ you can just use pointer, but it's a smart pointer, I guess, in this case.
I think you get away with it that like if you have a constructor like thing, you can get away with it if you make it an error not to initialize all the members in the constructor.
Yeah.
Like I think you can get away without an option type. Or at least for like forcing the default to be a null undefined type thing.
Are you talking about in Java?
I'm talking about just in general, like the need for an option type.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
well, the difference isn't just how it's initialized, but it's also how you use it, right?
Yeah, it's different languages have different rules. In general, like in Java, of course, you don't need option, but in certain languages, it's different.
Like C# is trying to move away from it because it's just so noisy.
Well, the problem isn't having null or not. It's whether or not in the type system, a null is the same thing as it. So like in Java, anything or any object can be assigned to null, and that's not part of the type system, meaning that, any property access or method call could presumably crash a program because because you can't call properties on null, but null has the same type as everything. Well, in a language like Scala or TypeScript, they still have null, but null is a separate type. So like if you have this thing called, in this case, environment enclosing, you can't assign that to be equal to null because that's a different type. It would be the same thing as trying to assign it to a number or something. But you can then have an option type, right? Like in Rust or whatever, that could then be, or in either, or maybe in Haskell, that can be one of those or the other, right? So like in Scala, you could have, what is it called? I think it's an either, right? So you could have an either environment or null, right? And then that's fine because then that's still part of the type system. I mean, in either something or null is the same thing as maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, so this is pretty much the intentional use case of null. Even though most in Java is people just forced to use null because they have no choice. But yeah, this is the case where we intentionally use null. And in some other languages, this need to make explicit because variables will not be able to assign null by default for most types. And now we add the blocking to statement, where block is just parentheses curly brace enclosed declaration, which is also a special kind of statement. It includes this statement and also the variable declaration, but all of those become statement in ASD. So the block in the ASD is represented just as a list of statements.
You really see the original comment about statement and state right there on that one line you highlighted. That's all a block is statements, and it's the state of the program.
Well, but it's a list of statement, not a list of state.
Right, but the statements are the state of the program, right? You don't store.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, going back to what was originally said.
Yeah, that's a cool point. Yeah, I was thinking about it at the beginning. I actually missed that too. So that kind of blew my mind, and that's a good example of it here.
Yeah. Just most like language with curly braces works this way, but there can be other choices though. I can totally have a block have an expression at the end. Some languages do, like Rust or even Ruby. Even though Ruby doesn't have curly braces, but I guess it's an example.
What did you mean by block heavy?
No, I mean a block with an expression at the end.
Oh yeah.
So a block evaluates into something.
Yeah. So that's in Rust. Yeah, that's a very common feature functionally. Like Rust has that, Scala has that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite features of Rust is that. Yeah, that's just one of my favorite features of Rust and Scala is that everything is very, like most things are an expression. Well, in Scala, everything's an expression, but in Rust, most things are expressions, which are cool.
Yeah. Certain things are best leave as statement though, especially for imperative features. Some things, for example, assignment, making it expression, it's just weird. Yeah.
I'm kind of, I think I'm kind of torn on adding more expression, like I like it definitely makes things wider instead of taller, and I'm wondering, like, just as far as comprehension, like there's that balance between very succinct and a bit more verbose with things like Java way on the verbose side, but you start introducing everything as an expression, it gets very, very dense.
I guess that's a balance you need to make on your own if you are designing a language.
And that's also the other thing, it's also the person expressing it.
Yeah. My take is that people always like to talk about one-liners, but reading one line of Haskell is not same as reading one line of Java. The cognitive load is not the same. So I don't think terse code is that important.
Yeah, but you don't have to, it doesn't have to be terse in order for things to be very expression oriented. Like the example you gave of in Rust blocks are expressions. Sometimes that's nice because let's say you want to assign a variable to be something, but you sort of need a couple steps to do that, right? Then in Java, what you might do is that you might define a method that takes whatever variables are in that current function and then do some processing on it and then return the value. So then you would say, or in Java, you'd say whatever, something A equals this function call. But in Rust, you could say, let A equals and then just a block. And if it's only 2 lines or something.
Like in C++, I often do immediately invoke lambda expression for
that's what
this
I was
purpose,
thinking.
and in Rust it's just a block.
In Rust, are the macros doing that something? Are they using that block where you have a block expression type thing? Would that be like when you do their macros? Is it just really just a block with a value, like a block expression?
I think it depends on how you define the macro. So in Rust, I don't think it's like that in Rust.
Oh, okay, because I could.
Yeah, they can evaluate to be expressions for sure. But the macro system in Rust uses a totally different, like it's a lot more than just whether or not it's a block.
Okay. Because I've wanted that where I'm not introducing a new function, but I want the scope, like an IILE, but you definitely don't have that in C++, where you can
Right.
and like it's almost like I want to return from the scope, but without saying return, because I don't want to.
Yeah, although I've done some things like that, which is probably very unidiomatic, but I've definitely done stuff like that in C++, and especially in C, was just normal blocks. Like if I want to do some part of my function that's like pretty independent, but I don't think is enough code to be its own function. A lot of people don't like this, but I will sometimes just use like a scope, like an inner block inside of my function to just.
Oh yeah, definitely. But sometimes I want like a function that I can return from, but it returns from the parent scope, not the inner scope.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying that, like, you can't do an immediate vote lambda in, like, let's say C, but you could do something like int I and then a block where you do some stuff, and then at the end of that block, you assign I.
That sounds awkward though.
GCC
Yeah,
have
you can do it.
expression if or something.
What?
I think GCC might like have expression if.
What does that do? Oh, like if is an expression? I don't think so. I mean, you can just use, if it's an if that I want, then I could just use what's it called, the ternary condition.
They have statement expressions.
Yeah, GCC have some weird extensions.
Huh. So like, wait, what do you refer? Like, what would be the code?
So you would be able to, I think from I'm trying to find it, but I'm thinking like like where you were saying int I and then a scope or something.
Yeah.
I think you could do that from an if type thing in GCC.
Oh, what would be the if? Like, what would the code that?
I'm trying to think about it. I might not be thinking.
Sorry, what were you saying?
I'm not sure offhand. It seemed to ring a bell. I'm sorry.
So the thing that I was talking about, I normally use that in my tests. Like sometimes having things in tests. Like if I have a few different test cases that I want to just put in one test instead of multiple tests, I'll like enclose each test in a block.
I do that too.
So yeah. I don't do the thing that I was describing where I like, say int and then do that kind of stuff. But I'll use scopes and other things. But oftentimes in code reviews, people just tell me to make them functions, but I'm like, I don't care.
Blocks with a return. It's intriguing. The blocks with a return type.
Yeah, no, I haven't
Or a
done.
value, like an expression block or something.
Yeah, I don't really do that, but I definitely use them for like tests.
Yeah, and then for the semantics of the block, we just have this helper function where we have a new environment. We put a new environment in. We just loop we just loop and then execute for each statement. So in here, the approach is manually change the environment and restore them with this finally block. So I think another classic approach is actually the more often used approach is to explicitly pass the environment as a parameter for each visit method. And then you don't need to restore the old one. And then he decided it's tedious and verbose, so he will not use it, but instead
like
use
those
this
comments.
hack. Sorry, what?
The sidebar is really nice. It gives, an insight into how they were thinking and why, the why.
Yeah,
Yeah, especially for this kind of unusual design decisions.
Yeah, I think the sidebars and like the bottom parts are my favorite parts of the book.
Yeah, I really like his writing style with those. His previous book that game like game programming pattern also are full of those. It's also my favorite part. Yeah. No, this kind of code also works. So really nice. And now there's this design note that I really like. So there's this thing called the implicit variable declaration, which exists in Python, Ruby, CoffeeScript, and JS. For JS, we can just try. Oh, we already have A, so let's do B. B is not defined, right? Yeah, B is not defined, but we can do something like this, and now B is defined. But just the ability to implicitly define variables without the declaration syntax, just using the assignment. Yeah. See you later. And in JS, this is widely considered a mistake because it's just always implicitly define global variables, so it gets disabled by the strict mode. I don't know about Ruby and the CoffeeScript, but in Python, assignment always create a variable in the current scope. So sometimes when we need to refer to the parent scope, it gets confusing, and there are two keywords, local and non-local and global, to deal with that.
I feel it's better just not to shadow the name.
Maybe.
I find it, it forces one to think about where, you have to think more when reading it.
Yeah, maybe the linter need to enforce that in Python. Yeah, because I don't want to say those two keywords in Python code, but basically, I think this implicit variable declaration is a pretty bad idea, and they also agree. Just the simplicity argument is basically lost.
the extra structure, I think, adds to being able to reason and to check for errors. Like, you know, was it a mistake or not? It kind of makes it less likely that it was, to say var or let, or, you know.
So in strict mode, you can still use var, but it's that you have to declare new variables with var. You
Yeah,
can't.
yeah, and in strict mode, you can use var. You can't do stuff like this.
Yeah.
The implicit was just doing
you
it
can
like
do
an
this
assignment.
even in a local scope, and it defines a new global variable.
The implicit meant using it like an assignment, right? It just
Yeah.
an assignment creates variables.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the big problem is that what he was just saying is that in JavaScript, it would implicitly create global variables.
Well, also typos. You don't get
Yeah.
an error.
Yeah, the same with, well, it's the same with all those implicit declarations that you have a typo, it just silently create a new variable.
Mm-hmm.
I think I tried to convince Python people a few times that this is a design mistake rather than a feature, and I think I largely failed.
I wonder if there's been like you did a like a PEP or whatever they're called.
Did what?
Did you file like a request for change, those PEPs, or is it just
No, of course not.
Oh, okay.
I
That'll
was
be
just
Python
like talk about just like talking to Python users about like
Oh,
what is
okay.
good and bad about Python, stuff like that. It's not like I'm trying to change Python language.
I wonder how people would feel about that if they did change it to remove that.
It's like I don't know, billions lines of Python code are written with that assumption. How do
Call
you
it Python
change
4
that?
then.
Billions of bugs.
Well, that's it, right? You don't see like yeah. And then somebody serializes it and it becomes part of their API.
Yeah.
Yeah, do we want to have a Python 4 that break everyone's code even worse than Python 3? I don't know.
I can't.
Well, it would be a quick mechanical fix because you could just look for the
That's what
syntax
they
error.
said about Python 3. They're like, oh, just use 2 to 3 and you'll be fine. Yeah, right.
Write a Python 3 tool that looks for uses the Python 4 compiler, looks for the error, and inserts a let into the code, and then compiles it again or runs it again.
I don't know if I trust that. I think a better approach is probably some kind of semantic analysis to like try to find all the first use and then insert let.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anyway, when designing a new language, I think this is implicit declaration is something to avoid, even though it's add a little bit of syntax. It's really just only a little bit. It's just a keyword.
Yeah, so in Python, you could imagine it just being added as like an annotation, kind of like types in Python, right? So it's like it doesn't even have to be part of the. So like, yeah, it could just sort of be ignored by the interpreter, but then that way you could have tools like linters that you could enable that would like warn if you don't use var when creating a new variable.
I think we've learned that if you don't give people errors by default, they will never enable them. Like, look, this is the problem with C++ in a lot of areas. Nobody turns on the warnings or uses the linters or.
That's true, but some people do, and if some people
Yeah,
use that, I mean, you could say the same thing with types. I know, like, you don't need types in Python, and I think most people probably don't use the type annotations, but
I thought that was changing though. It's becoming such a it's becoming such a common practice for at least Python shops. Maybe not.
I don't know what I mean. Common is relative. I would suspect that every day, 99.9% of all the Python lines written don't have type annotations on them. Or
That's a really high number, but yeah, I agree.
I would-
Most
okay,
Python
maybe
code
I-
I
at
see.
least-
But I guess-
don't use.
I would not believe a number less than 95%.
You have a huge beginner user base in Python too. Not professional programmers.
Okay, for professional programmers, I would probably put it closer than to maybe 95%. I mean, I'm just making it up, but I would guess that the vast majority of
Really?
people programming Python for their jobs, yeah. Especially not like 100% type coverage. But
Yeah,
there's still like if I mean I try to use them in my programs when I can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
My
also, think about
Python.
it, most Python code in the world is probably inside like Jupyter notebooks or something, right?
Okay.
So no one's using type annotations in there, I think.
I guess a lot of the Jupyter notebook, it kind of promotes smaller code and then you also got all the literate parts of it intermingled.
Yeah.
oh, that visual language. Yeah, that's a the visual language mentioned in the comments.
But,
Yeah, people should look at that.
but Visual still doesn't have a variable declaration keyword. So
It doesn't. It's a experiment on design by contract.
Well, that sounds beautiful. I like contracts.
implored.
Yeah, implore and swear. And
Well, that's
yeah, if
swear.
you violate
I
the
like that.
contracts, you will be punished.
So swear is like assume. I assume.
Yeah,
Implore is I'm begging you to make sure that n is greater than 0.
So I guess swear is like an assert that gets removed in production builds, and then implore.
yeah, implore is assume, and swear is like assert.
Wait, but do they both, or do either of them get removed at like for production builds or?
No, well, it's Python. We don't care about speed. We
Oh,
care
right.
about everything else.
If a caller
And-
fails to provide valid arguments, it is wrong and must be punished.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's funny how he's using all of these like implores and swears, but he's not adding type annotations, right?
no,
I feel like that's like the first place to go. You
I
know,
think this was just a joke for a quick weekend.
yeah,
language.
it's just a joke.
It's got 2.7 thousand stars.
I mean,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Bob Nystrom. It's the same guy that wrote the crafting interpreters.
oh, you know what? I can't take a joke. That makes so much sense. I mean, I thought these were just adding asserts, and I was like, okay. You know, but now
No, the deleting from your source files when I clued in.
oh, I didn't read the whole thing. I just saw this now. Yeah, I'm a sucker. My bad.
You can
Yeah.
already see it's a joke when it says like the medieval. Yeah, this is similar to contracts, but less legal and more medieval.
Some people might, yeah, I was only browsing it, so I didn't get the joke. But I could see somebody saying that on a serious language. Like, you know, some people are not, some people are a little strange. I'm not saying
Maybe.
he is. It's a joke, but
I mean, less legal and more medieval. That sounds like undefined behavior in C++.
well, yeah. Look at that. Look at what we put up with, or a
Yeah.
lot of us.
That's
I
pretty.
mean,
Yeah.
I would not be surprised to see the phrase supreme moral vigilance in a Haskell code base.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that was really funny on the sidebar thing because that, yeah, supreme moral vigilance would fit well in Haskell.
Okay, so let's end the recording.